Owners didn't want to give me what I deserved. Now they are about to lose a $3 million contract because I resigned. I am a young project manager for an unlimited commercial GC. I picked up a hammer for the first time 6 years ago. No prior experience. I was raised believing if you work hard and apply yourself you will be successful. For 2 years I learned everything that I could in the construction industry, took my work home with me and studied on my own time to better myself. For that I was promoted to foreman. I was brought in to take over a small project at a 12-building 120-unit condo complex. It started small and the board of directors for the HOA told me they loved my professionalism, work ethic, and ability to complete projects on time and under budget. We won a big contract because of that small project. That was 3 years ago. I have since taken over the job of foreman, superintendent, and project manager. I do the billing, meetings with engineers and board members, scheduling, takeoff, material ordering. I even train the subs on application of new products because we didn't have enough mid-management. The project just passed $2.7 million. We got a bid request for another $3 million job in the same complex. All the while the board of directors telling me how appreciative they are and how they've gone through 5 different contractors in the years before committing to my company because of my management and quality of work. This boosted my confidence, and I went to the owners asking for the raise they promised me 1 year ago for my production. They told me the experience you're gaining is far more valuable. I said you're right. I put my resume on public, got contacted by a headhunter, just accepted an offer this week for $80,000 a year salary, full benefits, 28 days PTO including holidays, in the office now, no more working from the field, full in my own truck, laptop, Wi-Fi in my truck for on-the-go billing when I visit the out-of-state projects, $80 per diem. 100% matching 401k for the first 3 years of my employment, quarterly bonus programs. The company I'm with now only pays me $40k, and that's it. None of the above listed benefits. The final nail in the coffin was when the owners bragged about how much my project made in a company meeting, and then need me a Christmas bonus. I laid this offer on their desk Friday, and watched their jaws hit the floor. I told the whole board president of the project I'm running about my resignation when they couldn't match the offer. His eyes got big and requested a meeting with the owners and expressed serious concern about moving forward with the new project without my involvement. They don't have anyone to replace me, and I'm not gonna lie, it feels good to hurt their pockets when I gave them everything I had for 6 years and only asked for the median project manager's salary. Duck those greedy bastards. Redditor's reaction. Story 2 after. Redditor 1, good job op, go get yours. Redditor follow up. Rule 1. Always look out for your own interest, always. Even when it seems like your company is taking care of you, refer to Rule 1. Redditor 2, 40k for the job you were doing is criminal. I was at my last job for 3 years. Got a ton of praise and raises the first year, and nothing after that. No raises for 2 years. I recently quit and they had to replace me with someone who doesn't speak English, which means they're also paying a translator. It take about 4 months to get up to speed in the position, and even then you'll spend another 4 to 6 months getting good at everything. So in my absence, my former boss has spent a ton of time picking up the slack. I also didn't give any notice. I put in for 3 days of PTO at the end of the week and no call no show the following Monday. So they didn't know I quit until 5 days after my last shift. Texted my former boss at 11 a.m. 5 hours late for the shift that their wage structure was unethical and I wasn't going to wait around for one of their particularly unsafe drivers to KLL someone. That guy really did almost KLL several people multiple times. Story 2, force me to deploy, I'll KLL your career. Sorry, quite long. Many of you saw this on Petty Revenge, but I guess the mods thought it was too serious, so here it is again. Sorry about the repost. Let's go back a few years. I was a combat engineer platoon sergeant. We had recently gotten a new company commander who thought his it didn't stink. My first interaction with him was when I got back from running an M240B range where I was told he wanted to speak to all leadership immediately in the conference room. Well, it took 3 hours for him to arrive, and despite one SG calling many times, he insisted we stay. The entire meeting was him bragging about himself and saying that he was trying to get the company slotted for a deployment to the Middle East, as well as how excited he was to go. I spoke up and basically said he's a dumbass, but with more words, which ended the meeting, which got me a stern talking to and thinly veiled threats. This captain had been in for 15 years and never once been deployed. That takes effort and a lot of figurative DCKSing. He only wanted to go now because he was up for major. It turned out brigade had a mission and asked for volunteers. Captain Dipset volunteered me to go despite knowing I had gotten married a week earlier. I made it very clear I did not want to go to the higher-ups. I was told it was between myself and the captain. Well, a month out, my sister-in-law committed suicide immediately after she miscarried at 33 weeks. Found them both in the basement of their house. Well, Captain Dipset didn't care. No leave, and I was still to leave about a week after the funeral. Duck him, I walked in to talk to the command sergeant major and was immediately dropped from the deployment. But the captain was so far up the battalion commander's ass that nothing happened to him. After about 8 months later, Captain Dipset got his wish. Headquarters platoon and one other was slotted to deploy. Of course, because I had the most combat experience and most deployments in the platoon, he naturally decided that's why my platoon should go. Now, in order to deploy, you first have to go to a month-long field exercise where you are graded on performance. This generally applies to the higher levels of leadership. By this time I was just pissed. So I got my squad leaders together and improvised a few missions. First, everyone was to follow the CPT's instructions as literally as possible, no matter how dumb, and not to give any advice. This led us to getting absolutely destroyed in training, which was glorious. Secondly, and most importantly, was the psychological aspect. So, this Dipset commander would go to bed nightly at 2100 no matter what. In the deserts of California you can find all sorts of creepy crawlies to slip in a sleeping bag while sprinkling juice on his uniform. They'd also periodically hide some of his gear or render his rifle inoperable. So for days this went on. Poor guy slept very little because I ensured his tent was set over top of a beehive. These bees hated any vibration and loved juice. The dumbass never realized why he was constantly getting stung. As we were to be falling under a new brigade, I had to go meet the higher-ups, and wouldn't you know it, the call we were set to fall under turned out had been my first company commander, who I got along great with. I pulled him aside and called up my squad leaders, where we basically told him Captain Dipset was going to get someone killed, pointed out his erratic behavior and the overall poor performance. Needless to say, he was quickly relieved of command career killer and sent back to work in an office where he belonged. As for myself and my platoon, I still didn't want to go, but the new company commander was my old platoon leader from my second deployment, plus I couldn't let my guys go without me. Turned out it would be my last deployment, as some injuries force you out of the military, but everyone came back alive. Edit, I sent a text to one of the old squad leaders because for the life of me I couldn't remember exactly what the deal was with the captain. He had been at E4 prior to becoming an officer. Clearly I did not care enough to retain that information. Redditor's reaction. Story 3 after. Redditor 1. Normally, this is the kind of story you hear about a second lieutenant, not a captain. The stupid is supposed to be weeded out by the time they reach that rank. Redditor 2. You saved everyone you cared about because you care. A selfish human would have got out and damn the rest. I wonder how your first CO got recycled back to your unit. Redditor follow-up. PLT leaders are usually LTs 0102, and company commanders are usually CPTs 03. Not a recycle, just a chance assignment. Redditor 3. By the title I thought this was about a software engineer who didn't want to do DevOps. Story 3. Manager targeted me because of my family priorities. It cost her job. I have worked at a certain home improvement store for close to a decade now, about 8 years roughly. The first 7 was in NC, before I moved up further north to be with my best friend and her husband, who I learned was pregnant with my first godchild. As such, I transferred up to a store in the area, and put my nose to the grindstone. I worked garden before, and did that for some months, before I started to be moved from department to department, as this store was low on staff. However, this was not full-time. My old HR had dropped the ball, and this store believed I wanted part-time. Having already moved, I grabbed a part-time overnight job at a gym to make ends meet, and continued to work, all the while asking repeatedly for full-time at the main job, and never getting a definitive word back or change. Several months into this, my goddaughter was born. As I lived with my friends during this time, and during the time of COVID, I spent quite a lot of time helping to raise her, and we became close. I would take time off that I was allotted to help look after her, and there was little problem. Half a year into this change, and I had made a good name for myself. I did not have a good deal of friends per se, but I was respected for my work ethic, and willingness to help out anyone, in any department, that asked me. Enter a new assistant manager. The ASM was abrasive to staff, and used to getting her way. The first I heard of her was when she outright fired a girl working the front desk because of a Playboy tag on a jacket. Myself and several other employees organized a walkout in protest of this, and succeeded in getting the store manager to reverse the decision made by the ASM. This was not our first walkout, having done this in the past when another ASM, the current's predecessor, made sexist comments about a cashier. Soon after this, I was given full time by the ops manager, working in receiving for a cantankerous supervisor. We often did not get along, especially as my godchild got older, and I took on babysitting duties while her parents worked and slept. It was not something I minded, as I adored the child. I often talked about her with my coworkers, and loved to show pictures and stories. However, this was not something shared by my higher-ups. My supervisor was upset that I could not work overtime to help him, as we were the only two in receiving for the store because of either my second job, or babysitting. And soon after the second walkout, I was made aware of a rumor circulating around the store that the child was in fact my own daughter, that I had fathered outside of my friend's husband's knowledge. The source of the rumor was unknown, but my ASM had made disparaging remarks to me in the past about men taking care of children. So I had my theories. My holiday plans, asked off in advance as soon as our electronic system allowed, were cancelled without explanation, both Thanksgiving and Christmas. I had never missed a major holiday since I moved north, and I had asked the same days off the year prior, and had gotten them off, before the ASM arrived strike one. And soon after this, my supervisor, whom I work closely with every day, had a positive COVID test, forcing me per company rules to self-isolate until I could get a positive or negative test myself. During this week, as it took a full week to find a place with enough room to give tests thanks to Omicron, I was harassed repeatedly by text and phone call by both management and my supervisor to track down an at-home test and get back to work ASAP. All the while, I had to inform everyone I was in contact with, including my friends, family, and roommates, that I had been exposed, risking their own holiday trips and plans strike two. Thankfully, my test was negative. A week after this, the Northeast gets slammed by a snow and ice storm. I drive a four-wheeled vehicle, and so made it in, but near the end of my shift, I was made aware that my friend's husband had been injured and stranded in a car accident on the ice, and so left to get them home and their car to a service station. To add to it all, they have lost power in their home, with an infant, leaving me with the only person they could turn to with a vehicle and power. I will admit, I had few sick hours left, but informed work that I would be out on a family emergency. For that week, I called out each day with ongoing family emergency, with snow and ice still coating the streets, and power still down throughout our city. And every day, I was hounded by calls from management, demanding I return to work regardless. This would have not only risked my own safety, but would have stranded my family at my apartment, with no way to get supplies or get home once the power returned. Strike 3. I was done. Early in the morning that following Sunday, I walked into work, and placed my resignation letter on HR's desk. That is important ladder. I had tendered it to be immediate, as I live in an at-will state. Was it petty? Yes, I will freely admit that. I had given 8 years of my life to this company, and asked very little in return. As I was leaving, I crossed paths with my supervisor, who asked angrily if I was finally coming back to work. I informed him of my decision to leave, ignoring his provocations, and left to go home and sleep. Several hours later, I received the gift that would ignite my semi-accidental revenge. A single text from my ASM: "We will see how long you can take care of your love child without us." Well. Seems I found my probable source. My friends had been made aware of this rumor from the start. I did not hide anything from them, and did not want any kind of rumor, however unlikely, to reach them from anyone but me. They are my closest friends and compatriots, and have given me the greatest gift in the form of my godchild, whom they insist I call my niece, as I am family. Love child feels like a slur against her, and I am not cool with that, and neither are they. However, they informed me of the monumental screw-up my now former ASM had made. It was time for corporate HR to be made aware, and so I began to compile my evidence, the texts from my supervisor, the call records and messages left, and this holy grail of a text message. If I was going to leave, I was at the very least going to give some blowback on the team that had been so willing to target me. What happened after is secondhand from friends I had still at the store, and so I cannot entirely verify all of it, but the ASM played herself. The following day, a meeting of management and supervisors was convened, where the ASM made it known that I had been fired, not self-terminated, for job abandonment and immorality. And unless I am grossly misinformed about the nature of American retail work, immorality is not a fireable event. To my supervisor's credit, he defended me to the ASM and was fired on the spot. The store's HR rep, having earlier gotten my printed termination letter on his desk, made it known that I had indeed not been fired, but left on my own. And the ASM attempted to fire him as well, in front of the staff. And from there, it spiraled. According to my source, entire departments began to walk out or outright quit, having had their own problems with the ASM. Appliances quit to a man. Garden left with their manager to work at a competitor's, as he had been working on this well before my saga began. Front desk walked out in protest, as it came out that the ASM had threatened and blackmailed several Muslim part-timers to not wear their headscarves if they wanted hours. Lumber, receiving's main partner, quit. Pro desk joined the front desk protest, as one of their number, a Sikh man, had also been threatened. Cashiers, both head cashiers, quit, and the other trained cashiers walked out with the desks. Ops manager had informed the district manager, and quit outright before he arrived, walking out with the HR rep and my old supervisor. My source's last report of the ASM was seeing her sprinting to her car, after having heard that the district staff was inbound, and the store manager was forced to shut the store down for the next 2 days, last I've heard. I've been in contact with the other injured parties, and we're compiling all the evidence we've collected, as several of the families are hiring lawyers. I suspect the company will attempt to keep this quiet. I just never suspected that anything like this would happen. I have a full-time position at the gym upcoming, and I've been enjoying the extra sleep and time I get with my family. I'm never working 56, 64-hour weeks ever again. And I will never darken the doorstep of that store again. I hope my ASM enjoyed the temporary rush of power. I suspect she won't get it ever again, at least not in manager positions. Redditor's reaction, story 4 after. Redditor 1, hopefully, the ASM will find herself permanently unemployable in the job sector and will enjoy an exciting career as a cashier at the local discount gas station. Because discount gas stations are notorious for having the lowest wages possible and no opportunity for promotion. Redditor follow-up, don't think she will get that good a position, perhaps shelf stocker and garbage collector at the place. Redditor 2, I don't know how this all works given that I'm not American, but you could potentially go after them for constructive dismissal. The ASM harassed you into resigning. Talk to a lawyer. Redditor follow-up, lol no. We don't have worker protections like civilized countries. Yes, this is constructive dismissal, and OP would likely be eligible for unemployment if he weren't working full-time at the other job. But that is not something you can sue over here. Story 4, bag of nails. I am a dry liner, which means I do a lot of moving around for my trade, as most of the work I do is towards the end of most projects. This means that I spend a lot of my time renting flats and houses for only short periods, usually about 6 months at a time. This has meant that I have had to deal with a lot of landlords over the years, both good and bad. When it comes to the bad landlords, I will normally just walk away and get on with moving to the next job and take the loss of my deposit and never use them again if I am working in that area in the future. But this particular landlord got my back up so badly I was not just going to just walk away. I had managed to get myself onto a big job in London working on the new Wembley Stadium, so decided I would look for a house to rent rather than a flat, as I know I was going to be working on it for a while, and found a reasonably priced for London house to rent from a private landlord in a local newspaper. I gave him a call and meet with him later that day. He seemed okay, went to view the house, paid him the deposit cash and moved in that weekend. I ended staying in the house for nearly a year with no problems. Always had the rent paid into his bank account on time and fixed any small problems that might crop with the house myself without bothering him. Up to the time when it came to moving out, only ever spoke to him twice on the phone after there was an issue with the heating that I was unable to fix myself, and he sent an engineer round the next day to fix the boiler. Come the time that the job was finishing, I went round to the pawn shop that he owned to give him notice that I would be moving out the following month, and to let him know that I was happy for him to come round to inspect the house before I moved out, so that I could get my deposit back from him when I returned the keys. He never came round while I was in to inspect the house, and so I assumed that he had come round and let himself in while I was at work, as I had told him that I had no issue with him doing that if need be. So on the day I moved out, I went around the shop and handed him his keys back and asked for my deposit. His response was, "What deposit?" "The month's rent that I gave you in advance of moving in as a security deposit," I replied. He then told me he was keeping that to cover the cost of repairing damages caused while I was living in the property. I responded, "What damages?" With the bits of work and decorating I had done on the house, it was in a better state now than when I have moved into it. His response was to step forward and get right up into my face and say, "You're not getting it back, so FK off," and he then gave me a shove which needed me to take 3 steps back to avoid falling on my essay. Now I am what you would class as average size and build, and this landlord had a good 4 chess on me height-wise, and obviously spent some time down the gym, and the wise move would be to back away and cut my losses. Now, before I was a builder, I was a member of the British Army in a regiment called the Royal Green Jackets, and they had trained us that the best way to proceed when confronted with aggression is to meet it swiftly and with much more violent aggression. So without even thinking about it, I started to move forward with the full intention of dropping this twat quickly and painfully. After the first step through, a thought popped into my head like a bolt from the blue, so I stopped and took a moment to examine the idea from a few different angles, said okay bye to my now ex-landlord, and walked out of his shop. What the landlord did not know was that I had had a spare backdoor key cut when I had lived in the house, which I had stashed in my van in case I ever lost the key so I could still get back in. So later that evening I let myself back in and decided to stop for one last night before leaving in the morning for my next job, which was in Scotland. I spent the last night in the house carefully removing every bit of wood in there. I took down doors, removed skirting boards, banisters, architrave and floorboards, being extremely careful not to damage anything. I also completely dismantled all the kitchen units, took up the wood flooring and carpets. I then left everything in nice neat piles in each room. I got in my van the next morning and was preparing to start my drive when I decided I wanted to rub a little more salt into my ex-landlord's wounds. So I stopped at his shop on the way out of London, got a spare hammer, screwdriver, bag of nails and box of wood screws out of the back of my van and went into the shop. My ex-landlord was not there, probably for the best, so I left the tools with his confused-looking assistant and told her to tell her boss you will be needing these, and left for my drive north. I had my phone switched off while driving, and a few hours later, while I was having a bite to eat in a service station up by Nottingham, I decided to switch it back on and was greeted by a string of text messages and some very colorful voice messages which left me chuckling to myself. Edit: I did reply to one of the texts he sent me. The text was, "Do you think you're f-king funny leaving me nails and screws?" I responded, "Yes." Redditors' reactions. Redditor 1. You should have switched the doors and skirting into different rooms to make it a puzzle. This landlord probably does this to every tenant. Redditor 2. Hopefully the bag of nails were all a bit short and thin, and the screws were all just big enough to crack the wood unless you drilled a pilot hole. Hammer missing a wedge, and the screwdriver with a rounded off tip. Redditor 3, by the way, I think you can still report the prick. Landlords are not allowed to directly hold deposits anymore. Deposit protection. Redditor follow-up, tenant protection laws are great. Moving out of a rental, our landlord was always super busy and didn't have her priorities straight, it seemed. We met, Had a good chat about what we'd be responsible for and how much of the security deposit would be withheld. BS reasons, really. A week later I asked about the deposit balance. She said she'd get it. A few days later ask again, no response. I look at laws, they have 30 days to get it back to us, or they have to pay in full. I decide to go silent. 31 days out I sent a long email explaining the fact I had asked for it. She said she was working on it, showing open communication. Then I said she had 30 days, and we were now at 31 days. She owed me the whole thing, or I was going to sue. We had a check in a few days. Redditor 4, I can't imagine a combo pawnshop owner landlord being anything but a massive piece of acid, and this story confirms that. Redditor follow-up, as soon as I read that the landlord was also a pawnshop owner, I immediately knew something was up.